Brian.
Hey, what's up?
Hey, how's it going? Thanks for meeting me for coffee. I'm super excited. The Department of Behavioral Health has asked us to kick off this May Mental Health Awareness Month, and they've asked us to kind of talk about some of these videos that the folks are going to watch because of what you and I talk about with brain-wise solutions and brain development, and how all the experiences that we have shape us as human beings. So they want us to do that. So are you down?
Wow, do they have a theme?
The theme is experiencing hope. And you know, we kind of pull from, let's not always talk about trauma, let's talk about resilience and positive and experiences.
So tell me, what are you thinking?
I don't know. You mentioned a movie that I haven't seen, and you said that there was a great story about the journey that these folks went through. Can you? I don't even remember what it was.
Yeah. So I don't do a lot of movies, so the few that I do, I remember, right?
There you go.
So we took the kids to go see Guardian of the Galaxy, and there was this one character, her name was Nebula, right? And she was this nemesis, this villain, and she really had experienced a lot of pain and suffering at the hands of her father, right? And she had a sister who escaped all that, and she had all this pain and suffering and resentment, and she had set her life goal at causing and killing her sister so that she would have some idea of what she went through, right? But in this story, this process, she finally got to tell her sister about her pain. She released all of that, right? And in that process, she reconnected with her sister and built a new connection that allowed her to shift from villain to superhero.
Nice.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
And I think when the work that we've done, we've seen people talk about their experiences, right? And how they matter. And some of them have cast themselves in these roles as victims and sometimes even villains, that negative self-talk, right? And I think what I realize is that when you do this work, when you start to really understand and make sense out of our stories, that's where we transition from pain and suffering to purpose and service, from trauma to resilience.
Nice.
Right? Yeah. And so I'm wondering if that's what we can kind of help center for the folks that may be watching these videos, is looking for that story arc of moving from pain and suffering to purpose and service, from trauma to resilience, experiencing hope.
Because experiences matter. That's what we say all the time. Nice.
Yeah,
cool.
That's cool.
Yeah, cool.
I'm
Let's
excited.
get to some movies.
Yeah.
Let's see it.
I can't wait.
So in this video, what we're gonna see is a young person who talks about her experience with a serious mental health situation. And I think the key there is that she did find hope. She talks about some confusion, but then getting to a place where she found the resources that she needed. And I think you and I have talked about in that example with movies and heroes is like Batman and his belt. She was like wandering around looking for her Batman's belt, and then finally she found it, she put it on, and she found the resources, and that was the key to her.
Podcast.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah.
When I was about 17, I was diagnosed with bipolar disorder 1. I didn't know anybody, to be honest, who had bipolar disorder. I didn't know what it was. It was very confusing, but what had happened was I got really stressed and was not eating and sleeping well because I had to make a decision about college and COVID, and all this news was coming out. So I was hospitalized, and thankfully everything went okay. My family was very understanding, but it was a challenging situation to navigate. And now I'd say I'm 20 now, so it's taken a few years to get to my point, but finally accepting after multiple hospitalizations and realizing that, okay, this is a part of who I am, but I'm okay with it, and it's okay to have a mental health condition. A big part of me being diagnosed with bipolar disorder and thriving was finding coping mechanisms and methods to really keep me going when times got rough. I think the biggest thing is I'm very thankful for the support systems, going to counseling and also talking with my loved ones about how I was feeling and having that constant check-in on, okay, what can I improve? Being rational about my thoughts. Sometimes I think things out of the proportion and I am more pessimistic, but people around me being my support system reminded me of who I am, even with having this condition. So that was a great thing, but I think just knowing there's tomorrow, like knowing there's a chance tomorrow when I wake up, I'm gonna feel a lot better. Even though I'm not feeling good right now, I'm gonna make it through. So that's a really good mindset to have. Wording that I am resilient, I am strong, affirmations, I guess. And so despite being diagnosed with a mental health condition, I know that I am enough, and I'm finally realizing that, and it's really reassuring, and it has helped me grow. And that's the great thing about this whole journey, maybe 3 years now in the making, is developing myself and developing who I am and learning that I'm able to overcome a lot of challenges. So I started a small podcast when I was in undergrad, and I was in my last set of classes for my entrepreneurship degree, and we were instructed to create an adventure. So every entrepreneurial venture typically includes solving a problem, and I thought about my biggest problem was like navigating this experience of being diagnosed and feeling lost throughout the process. But I thought and I brainstormed, and I came up with blogs, I came up with websites, but I eventually found that, I love podcasts, and it's a really cool way to spread a message. And so I created the High-Low podcast, and I just picked up a mic, had a laptop, started interviewing people who have bipolar disorder, sharing their stories, inspiring people. And now people from all over the world have heard the stories of people who have overcome their challenges with bipolar disorder. And it gained traction. So I was featured on ABC 30, Fresno State News, and the Business Journal for my podcast. And it's great because I've received messages saying, okay, my friend is dealing with this, and it really helped, and I appreciate your advice. So just a little small thing had a big impact. I keep on going, and every day, it's a different experience, but I have a vision for what I'm gonna do. Do I know exactly how that's gonna turn out or what's going to end up happening? No, but I know there's good things. I know I want to achieve professional, personal achievements, but most of all, I want to develop the relationships that I have, my family, my partner, and whoever else comes into the picture later on. And it provides me with a sense of optimism for the future. And for sure, there's lots of times when I'm emotional, I'm not sure if I'm gonna make it through. I work full time, I go to school full time, it's exhausting, you can burn out, but there's people around you who care, and most of all, like, realizing that I am strong and I can get through this, and having a little bit of hope about what you can be.
So this next one is all about a mom living in the world with her children. And I mean, this one just goes right to your heart, because just imagine, and you've been through some stuff with your children, so have I, just that experience of going through something and not knowing where to go.
Right.
And then finally they find hope in the resources that are in the community. And it's just a really good story about going through it.
And you know what's so important about that, right, is that sometimes as parents, we can't see our way out of this. We can't see past the suffering and hurting of our kids, right? And we experience that deeply. but to know that there's resources out there for families and parents, right? And you're not alone.
Yes. Huge.
Parents, you're not alone.
Yes.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Cool, let's do it.
I noticed my daughter was having anxiety problems or some kind of issue because she was very different in the sense of she used to be outgoing, sociable. She just started fighting with her brother and her sister. Everybody annoyed her, especially with me. Anything that I did or said bothered her. No matter how hard I tried, I didn't know what was wrong with her. I asked her, and it took about a month until she decided to come up to me and tell me, "Hey, Mom, this is what's going on. This is how I feel. I'm not sure what it is." So that's when we figured that maybe we should talk to someone and see what we can do in regards to her situation, because I didn't know what it was. To be honest, I just thought, well, maybe she's just not having a good day. Just maybe she was sick of something. I just didn't know. We weren't really aware of mental health issues. So it kind of made it hard for us to point out what was really going on with her. It was very scary for the whole family to see that we didn't know how to control it, or she couldn't control it, and I couldn't do nothing to help her control it, because she would have, with the anxiety also came panic disorders and intrusive thoughts. And those intrusive thoughts were the ones that scared us a lot. It was horrible. You can find a pediatrician doctor anywhere, but finding a therapist that was available for her, it was just hard because she was underage, was one. To our insurance, even though we had private insurance, it was hard to get her in. Her pediatrician has said that the numbers have gone up on mental health, and since the pandemic hit, and that is the reason why we couldn't get any help anywhere. I called about 10, 15, maybe 16, I don't know, I just lost count after the 10th one. And I was about to give up because it was so hard for me to get a therapist and get her in to get that help that I just didn't know what to do anymore. I went to one of my friends for dinner, and she let me know that I can try this company with this other therapist. And I said, well, let me check her out and see if they have anything available. And she's the one that my daughter is with as of right now. But it took me 6 months to get in. And within those 6 months, it was a struggle. I don't know what we would do without the help of the therapist, on top of the help of the school. The school and her therapist have been, amazing. I'm not saying she's 100% better. I'm saying it's helped. She's doing better. She does struggle with it daily. One day could be good, one morning could be awful, and she's learning how to cope with it, and there's certain things that she does to help herself.
So last year at the Young Authors Fair, there was an honorable mention by a student who had submitted a story called My Anxiety Journey. And it was really interesting that a 5th grader had written about their anxiety journey. And so started really thinking about what was going on with this 5th grader, what is their story about, things of that sort. And so one thing led to another. We ended up getting in contact with the student, her family, through the school, and kind of got a chance to really sit down and talk with her and review her story. And we said, you know what, we feel that this is a really powerful story. It's a story of hope, but it's also really a significant way of talking to kids, because these were words of a 5th grader talking about what they were experiencing. And we thought this would be a great way to communicate to other kids and young people about what's going on. So Kayla's story ended up going from being a story that was submitted into this published book, which we ended up using as a way to conduct outreach and education for young people.
So when she decided to write her book, I read it. I told her for the Authors Fair, I told her, are you sure this is going to be read? Fresno County is going to read that. She's like, yeah, what are the chances I win anything? I'm just going to write it. It's just easy to write because it's about me. I'm like, okay. So she wrote it. Well, then we find out they want to make a book out of it, publish it, and do a book release. And I had to talk to her again. Kayla, are you sure? Because this is something that everybody around us, and we're a small community, is gonna know what is going on with you. And we are very private in a lot of the stuff that we do, besides if our kids get a certificate and we put it up on social media, our vacations and stuff like that. But anything that has to do with physical or emotional stuff, we try to be private. Once again, because that's how we were brought up. And she said, yes, Mom, I know what the consequences are, but I'm here to write a book so people can know how to deal with it, how I dealt with it, that mental health is real, and kids my age do struggle with it because I want to help. Those were her words. My mom and dad were very surprised. They had no idea what was going on with her. They knew something was wrong with her. When she published her book, that's when we obviously let them know exactly what was going on. And they were really proud of her. They were really proud because she was strong and was able to talk about it. And we were there to support her because a lot of parents are not there to support their children. And me being my parents' child, I was getting the support I needed because I was by myself. I felt like I was by myself because we wouldn't talk about it. And nobody knew, so how would they help me if they didn't know what was going on? It is very important. Get the help as soon as you see something. Ask questions. I bugged my daughter. I seen the difference in her. You can tell something is wrong. You as a parent should be able to tell if something is wrong with your child. I'm not saying diagnose them. I'm saying you can tell something is wrong. And her not being around us, her being stubborn and upset about everything, that just wasn't her. And ask questions, ask them. I know we ask every day, how was your day? And you think, well, every day is gonna be the same thing. No, it's not. It's a different day. Every day is a different thing. And just be there and let them know that you're there to support them. And no matter what, they have your attention and you're able to talk to them. And sometimes you might be upset about the stuff and you might be scared. I was scared, but it's okay. It's okay.
So interestingly, in a few of these stories, there's this highlight on a different cultural aspect that is also so important, because again, our cultural experiences as we're growing up completely shape our experiences as adults. So a few of these stories really call out the difference between coming to this country or coming to this community, or where you were born and where you are now. All of those kinds of cultural things have a huge impact on people. A few of these stories, I think of Jamal, I think of Ashlee, I think of Olga, and I think of Susie. All of those stories have this through line of culture.
And I think what's so important about that is that we don't exist in a singularity of culture. Right? Yeah. We have cultures in our workplace, in our families, right? We have this diversity of culture, and in those cultures we have experiences, and some of those experiences are experiences of challenges and difficulties, but I think potentially each one of those experiences in those cultures are an opportunity to experience hope.
Sí hay ayuda allá afuera y todo el tiempo está la ayuda y lo mejor es gratis, no cuesta. Yo como encontré la ayuda, compartía que mi esposo estaba trabajando en una organización poniendo el piso y y pues yo tenía ya varios tiempos con tristeza, desánimo, no quería hacer nada en casa, y no nomás yo, también mis hijos estaban en ese como vacío, en ese cosa de que no tenemos ánimo de hacer nada por las dificultades de salud mental, la depresión que se vivía, ¿no? Así que mi esposo dijo, yo no sé qué pasa en ese lugar, yo veo muchas mujeres que entran, señoras, muchachas entran ahí y no sé qué hacen allá, cuando salen muy felices y contentas. Podrías ir tú y a lo mejor te ayuda a ti. Y yo decía que no tenía ánimo de ir a preguntar, además yo decía, ¿y qué yo voy a andar preguntando en ese lugar? O a lo mejor me van a querer vender algo y yo no quiero involucrarme en esas cosas. Así que él de alguna manera conectó con Verónica y no sé si acordaron o qué, solamente me dijo, lleva un recibo de electricidad y ella te va a orientar, nos va a ayudar a pagar menos. Y pues el propósito de la familia es siempre ahorrar en la cuestión económica, así que fui y ella me empezó a compartir todos los servicios que la organización ofrece. Y me comentó de las clases de zumba, las clases de joyería, de jardinería, la hora de café, y sí, al principio pensé, pues no sé qué vaya a ganar, a lo mejor nada más no voy a tener suficiente tiempo de ir a hacer mis quehaceres, pero me di la oportunidad porque yo quería perder peso y así que fui, tomé las clases. Y invité a mis hijos porque me dijeron que también los hijos pueden venir a la clase de joyería, a la de jardinería, y yo vi cómo sus caras comenzaban a cambiar, cómo el disfrutar regresó a sus vidas, cómo el sentir conectado con otras personas les alegraba. Era como cuando vas a la familia, ¿no? No tenían a sus abuelitas ahí, pero allá en el centro encontraron muchas abuelitas y se sentían bienvenidos porque todos les llamaban por su nombre, se dirigían y los veían a los ojos. Y yo, aparte, me sentía conectada y poco a poco estaba sanando. Entonces, sí hay esperanza allá afuera, hay ayuda allá afuera. Las organizaciones trabajan para darnos un servicio. Lo malo es que a veces no tenemos la información, pero de que hay ayuda, y lo que dije es gratis, y nuevamente al momento de que uno se acerca ahí y poco a poquito se da el permiso, porque uno se tiene que dar el permiso de tomarse el tiempo, porque aunque uno piensa que está haciendo joyería, no, a la misma vez estás en una terapia donde tu mente está sanando porque estás compartiendo y te sientes conectado, que perteneces a un lugar y que encuentras amistades sinceras y son seguras. Es un lugar seguro donde uno puede compartir y abrir. Y si participas en todos los otros programas, poco a poquito va uno conociendo y entendiendo mejor los problemas de salud mental que nos afectan y incluso los problemas de salud mental que suceden con nuestros adolescentes, con nuestros hijos, y a veces hasta de alguna forma nosotros terminamos ayudando a nuestra pareja, que a veces cuesta mucho trabajo acercarlos a esas organizaciones también, que disfruten y que conozcan de esas situaciones. Sí, hay esperanza, hay ayuda y hay muchas ayudas. Simplemente necesitamos ir a acercarnos y darnos el permiso de tomar el servicio que está ahí para cada uno de nosotros, para cada uno de ustedes. Y nuevamente, el beneficio no nomás es para una persona, es para la familia y para toda la sociedad que nos rodea.
I cannot talk about mental health awareness without talking about the intergenerational trauma, joy, and depression that my family has went through for generations. My grandpa was actually 5 years old when he started earning an income in the fields. Although he started a lot earlier in the fields, when he actually started earning an income, he was only 5. And he actually cried the first time he told me about it. This is the first time that I ever saw him cry. Because he's a Mexican strong man But he cried when he talked about being in the back of a truck and seeing all the kids going to school and knowing that that wasn't an option for him, that he needed to travel to go make money for his family. For me as a little kid, listening to that story, it made me look at my own life and think, wow, I have a completely different life than my grandfather had had. And that had happened for generations before him. So thinking about him and his mental health and how I've seen this theme of pressure, of assimilation, and just this struggle with mental health throughout generations, I can see how it's impacted it all the way down to my own family and even my own son. I was really young when he first told me that story, but even then I could tell that he was robbed of his childhood. And I now, as I've studied mental health and I've educated myself on intergenerational trauma, I see these themes, these recurring themes through all of us. And as I analyze my past, I can see how the impact of oppression has had on my family. For example, my grandma and my grandpa have told me of stories of, they've told me stories of pesticides being sprayed on them while they're in the fields, and that's heartbreaking to me because I think they weren't seen as human when they were there. Not having restroom breaks and feeling pressure to finish the job, no matter how long it took. Also having, and as hard as it is to say, miscarriages in the fields because of the extreme labor and the heat has been just a part of our family story. And I just think about the impact. And when we think about like your body keeps the score and the toxic stress that has put into my family's body, how it's passed on for generations and generations and generations of anxiety and this fight or flight within their body, to have to feel like you have no other choice and there's no one there to help you. I wonder how alone they felt and how isolated they felt in those times. But despite all of that, I still hear within my family stories of joy, like my family saving up money to take a vacation to the beach, and that was the first time that they were able to jump in the ocean, or being able to sit at a table and drink coffee and eat pan dulce and laugh, and the women can talk about the children and just this feeling of like hugging and laughing. So even though there was a lot of oppression within my family as field workers, I know that there were also moments of joy together and love. So when I became a mother, that's when I realized, whoa, I have some mental health concerns that I need to work on. I definitely struggled from postpartum depression and anxiety, but it was this overwhelming feeling that I have a child and there's so many bad things in this world that I could not protect them from. And as a mother, all you want to do is protect your child, but at many points I felt helpless. And I was also stubborn. Like I said, I like to do everything on my own and take charge. And I didn't even have the skills or the coping or healing skills to know what postpartum depression was. I never had a medical provider who screened me for it because I put on my smiley face at my medical provider's office. And when they asked those screening questions, maybe I didn't have the self-awareness to answer them correctly, because I felt like my child has a home, they have food, they have a mom and a dad, so why would I be depressed? Why would I? It's so selfish to be depressed without, when I know there's so many more needs out there. But looking back, I know, and now that I've done more work, I realize that there are biological reasons that I've experienced anxiety and depression, and that's okay. But it's more owning that and being able to have a path to build resilience moving forward. I always think about like one of the happiest moments. It actually was recently. Me, my husband, and my son, we'd have saved for like 5 years to take this big trip to Hawaii. We got to spend a week there. And there's a moment that I'll never forget. It was a moment where the sun was setting, like we had got to the beach at perfect timing. And I could just see like the sky's blue and purple and pink. The ocean was like 80 degrees. And my son was like exhilarated. He was like screaming and jumping and laughing in the ocean. His dad was throwing a football towards him, and I was laying on the beach watching them. And I was like so happy, happy to see this child who feels free, and they has parents that love him, that really worked so hard to get him to Hawaii. And I started to cry because although I was like so happy that he was so happy, it was like the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. I think as a mother, that's like, you want to see that freedom of like, my kid is just being a kid. There's no worries in his life. Like, he doesn't have to worry about anything. But being a kid on the beach with his parents, it was so beautiful. But what also at the same time I felt is this mourning for my family, because I think back about my grandpa who never got to have that freedom, who never got to feel like all I have to do is be a kid. Or me and my sister, we never got to feel that freedom of, and when we did feel like we were having fun, in the back of our mind, there's always this thought of, but what's next? Is this fun permanent, or is there something else that might come up tomorrow? So being able to know that I've worked really hard on my mental health through seeing a therapist, through finding friends who are a support system, through having an active lifestyle of exercise, and being able to journal, and even like now it's cathartic to be able to tell my story and share it with others in a way that's raw and real, and not feel shame, to know all of that work that went behind having a child who gets to be free. It's also, I'm doing that for my grandpa, and I'm doing that for my grandma and the people who came before them, because all of the sacrifices that they made along the way and the oppression that they faced, they always had this vision that they came here to this country to make a better life for their children. And now they can know that it worked, that their hard work, we persevered as a family, and we showed resilience and grit and strength despite all of the things that have happened to us. And now my son gets to be on the beach in Hawaii, smiling and feeling free. And I hope, that's my hope for all of the generations to follow, is that the hard work that all of us has put into our family and to build resilience will continue.
So I thought it was really interesting how she talked about her grandpa. And I bet when she was a kid, she didn't necessarily see grandpa as a hero, but now, ours, right, as she reflects back, she was like, she lost it because she was like, my grandpa is my hero, and the things that I do for my son makes me the hero, right? So it's this interesting overlap of that story of how when we're in the moment, we're not really sure necessarily, is this good or bad? And our brains automatically want to make a judgment call, but when we look back, when we reflect, we're like, wow, maybe I am the hero in this story. And so I thought that was a beautiful situation that she explained through her experience.
So I think what's really an important takeaway from all of that, right? And as it pertains to the overall scope of the project, right? This experiencing hope, is that the past didn't change. What changed was how she saw it and how she made sense of those experiences of that past. But more importantly is how it has impacted the future and how she deals with and she brings that meaning to bear in her relationship, and shaping new experiences that matter, experiences of hope for her son. Right? And I think that is the message of this project, is that each and every one of us, regardless of our experiences, regardless of our strengths, our resources, we all have a story. And to the degree that we recognize that we are both the hero, the author, and director of our stories, is the degree to which we can make a huge difference in the stories of others.
So let's talk a little bit about this next one. Jamal, right? He was in he's gonna talk about the football program that he was in. And what you were telling me about is how it was interesting, the different sidekick situation that he was in and became. Can you tell me a little bit?
Yeah, so this idea that of a sidekick in a hero's journey is somebody who comes along, a helper, right? The person that's just doing what they do, a coach, a teacher.
Like the guy Sam in the Lord of the Rings.
Right.
He's coming along for the journey, yes.
But they are so significant because experiences matter, right? They become those catalysts that experiences of hope flow from, right? And as a result of that, people become resilient, and we may not recognize that somebody's story, because we see them on the football team, they made it to university, they're in this profession, and we may not understand that they also had a story. But because experiences matter, and because someone was there, right? And what I love about that is he's coaching today from a different perspective, a more clinical perspective, but he's doing exactly what was done for him.
Since I was a kid, I always loved sports. Growing up, I played basketball, baseball, I boxed for a period of time. When I got to high school, I began playing football. And in high school, I made a decision that for me, it was just difficult to play two sports. In this case, play football and play basketball and try and maintain solid grades. So in high school, I began to focus more on football. And the backstory for me is growing up in East Oakland, the youngest of 5 kids, I didn't know if my parents would be able to afford for me to go to college, or even my siblings. But I learned about the possibility of getting a scholarship. And when I realized that I had the potential to either get an athletic scholarship or an academic scholarship, that became a life goal for me. A goal that grounded me, a goal that kept me focused. But a pivotal point for me was junior high, because I heard about a coach in Oakland named John Bean, and he was the head coach at Skyline High School at the time. And I heard that this coach had a ability to help kids get scholarships. One of my biggest frustrations as a football player at Fresno State over the course of my career was that I never became a full-time starter. I came here as a middle linebacker, and my junior year converted to fullback, and I was fortunate to be on travel squad. I was fortunate to play special teams, so I got playing time. But as a competitor in football, you want to start. You want to be number 1, not 2, 3, 4, whatever is below number 1. And so each off-season and each season, even though in the stadium, the fans and my family and friends who are cheering for me, they might see on the outside, oh, doing great, playing on a scholarship, don't have the financial burden that other college students might have who don't have that scholarship. But as a student athlete, you really got to earn your scholarship. When you look at the time commitment throughout the year, especially in the off season is where you really train and develop and prepare to win championships and so forth. My first career out of college was actually in full-time ministry. In college, I got involved with the Fellowship of Christian Athletes, and that really gave me a great support system. It allowed me to, as I previously mentioned, to work through a lot on the personal level and as a teammate. And so my senior year, once I came to terms with the reality that I wasn't going to go to the NFL, or I probably should say I didn't even have any desire to go to the NFL. At the end of my career, I knew that God had something different for me. So I began to explore other possibilities. Do I go back for an MBA? Do I go back for sports psychology, sports administration? But when I went to the University of Phoenix and spoke with the counselor, he told me there was a degree in marriage, family, and child therapy. It's like, I could do that. I believe in marriage, I believe in family, I believe in helping people. That would be a great way for me to, if I'm not going to be a pastor anymore, if I'm not going to provide hope through a faith-based organization, well, yeah, I could become a licensed marriage and family therapist and provide hope in that capacity. And so that's kind of how I ended up enrolling back in graduate school to get my master's in marriage family therapy. And I knew that I wanted to get licensed. And this is now my 4th year in private practice. And I love it because mental health can be a very dark place. When I went and enrolled in the graduate program, honestly, I had no idea what I was signing up for. My expectations did not match the expectations of the industry. I had no idea that I was going to be doing assessments for suicide and homicide and sexual abuse and physical abuse and all these traumas. And what I would come to learn is that just like in football and other sports and professions, you have key fundamentals. As a mental health care professional, the fundamentals of what we do is, in essence, we keep people alive and we save lives and we protect people from harm and danger. But it's scary, especially for me with that pastoral background. I wasn't used to talking about suicide. I wasn't used to asking people, are they thinking about harming someone else? And how do you walk them through safety planning? And how do you talk with their family and support about keeping them safe? So it was scary. And even to this day, I still have some fear because there's always that fear of not asking the right question, not intervening in the right way. But what I've discovered is that many people, that's exactly what they want. They just want somebody, even if it's not a trained professional, they just want somebody to care enough to ask them, not just how they're doing casually, but how are you doing? What's been on your mind? Who's in your life? Who have you spoken with? If you haven't been seen in the last 3 weeks, why not? At the essence, whether it's ministry or mental health, I think in life, especially in these times, all of us as human beings just want to know that we're cared for. And when people can sense that you genuinely care, it's a game changer.
So, this next one, you were kind of telling me a little bit about it and kind of a connection, that idea that our stories are intertangled, right?
Yeah, for sure. So it's interesting where I'm at now with you at Brainwise. When I saw this one, I was like, man, that name sounds familiar to me. And I couldn't place it. And then as she's telling her story about music and her siblings and her faith and the trauma that she experienced as a child, I started to remember some of these story points. And then she mentioned someone's name, and I was like, that's it. So previously I did work at CASA, Court Appointed Special Advocates, and Allison, she's gonna talk about Allison, and that was her CASA in the story. And I'm like, man, we used to have conversations about how can you not be a sidekick, but go alongside with these kids, and now to see her as an adult. It's a beautiful story. So I'm super excited for everyone to see this one because it just, again, it hits home for me, and I'm so glad to see this beautiful story playing out the way it is.
To talk about my upbringing, it was well. I enjoyed my childhood for the most part. I lived with my dad, and then I went with my mom's on the weekends. Majority of the time, my dad was someone who went out into the community, and he was just a big part of the community, so that reflected what I wanted to do getting older. Everyone around me was either an entrepreneur or they were someone that I didn't want to be. So it was either one way or the other, and I was choosing to basically become someone good, someone that was inspirational, someone who was motivational, just like my dad. My dad had a very big impact on me, on my faith, everything that I believe in today. When I was 9, my father passed away, and that completely changed my life. I did not have a home anymore. Anything that happened in my life at that time completely changed. I ended up living with my mom, and she already dealt with mental health issues and her own illnesses. So it changed a lot how me and my siblings lived. So it was hard. And a lot of the things that we went through that was instilled into us was good or bad, but it helped create the person that I am today. To go forward, my oldest brother, he lives in Baltimore, Maryland. He came down to come get me and my brother from our mom. And so we lived in Baltimore, Maryland for about a year or so. After a while, since we haven't been around him so long, it didn't really work out, I would say. So he chose to bring us back down here and to put us into the foster care system. What he did not know was that the foster care system hurt us. And a lot of the times, a lot of people came in and out of our lives, which was painful. And it showed that there was not a lot of people that cared about us. And I would say that the foster care system failed my younger brother as of today, but I think with me, it had a different approach because I chose in my mind not to be a stereotype. I chose to overcome the past experiences that I dealt with and the past trauma and the past everything. I chose to be someone that was not just a Black girl, foster youth, or the Black girl, her parents died, or any of those things. I was like, I'm more than that. I'm going to be more than that. When I was 16, my mother passed away. She tried her hardest to get us out of the foster system, but the foster system made it really hard for her, to the point where she ended up giving up. But one thing she did do every month, get this big bag of clothes, and she would send it to me and my sister with hair products, barrettes, and she had this thing to make sure me and my sister twinned. I don't know why, but she always did. If she got one thing for me, she got the same thing for my sister. So my mom always tried. My mom was great. My mom had a big impact on me as well, because even though she dealt with her mental illnesses, she tried her best to be our mom. And so when she passed away when I was 16 years old, it broke my heart. It really did, because I lost my dad when I was 9, and then I lost her when I was 16. And it feels weird to say how you expected it to happen because of the way, kind of like deja vu, like you felt like this was happening. So it was even more emotional. It was more painful. It made me like stop everything. I completely stopped everything when it happened. And that's when depression got worse. That's when I started to deal with anxiety and deal with the trauma that happened even when I was growing up or in the foster system and everything. And I had to find an outlet, which was music. I love music. Ever since I was I can't even remember. I used to sing songs, and that's how I got through anything. I would literally make up a song and I would start singing. And that was my way out, I guess. That was my way out of crying. For the longest, I couldn't cry. For the longest, I didn't want to cry because I felt like it was my weakness. Everyone would say, how do you get through it? Everyone would ask me if it was me, I couldn't. Everyone would tell me I would have stopped, or I would have did this, or I would have did that. They say, you know, all the time, you were so strong to be 9. You know, you were so strong to be 16 and then to keep going. And all I could say is, if it wasn't for God, I don't know where I would be. If it wasn't for music, I don't know how I would have got through anything. All those things created the person that I am today. So I'm very grateful for that. I'm very appreciative of everybody that was in my life, because a lot of the people that actually stayed was checking in with me, was making sure I was all right, especially after they heard about my mom. A lot of people were like, you already lost someone, you know, you already lost someone, now you lost someone else. And you're doing so good, and to keep going, right? And as I kept going, I just learned that your past circumstances cannot determine your future. You can't let it determine your future, because that's how you get stuck in the box. That's how you become a stereotype to people. So in high school, that's when I experienced what actual mental health issues were and how to actually get through them. When it came to the anger management and the therapy that I went to, it was not easy. It wasn't easy for me to open up about it to a therapist, because it was more for me that they didn't understand. And I did not have a Black therapist either. So there was just a lot of disconnect there. But my therapist actually took the time to see what was wrong with me. She took the time to actually see me, which I did not get a lot when I was growing up in the foster system. I didn't really even have a voice either. So for her to actually say, like, I'm here for you and I need you to know that meant a lot. I don't know why, I cannot remember her name at the moment, but she even gave me my first journal, and she said, you do music, you do poetry. She said, start writing it down. She said, start writing it down, because your words are powerful, and when you write it down, they actually mean something. So she was the first person to tell me about, you know, writing it down and journaling, and that helped me so much, because there was times I couldn't talk to someone. I couldn't, it took me so long for me to be willing to even cry to her. So long, it took about probably 1-2 years for me to actually just come in, and I would just sit and cry. We wouldn't even say nothing to each other. I would just sit and cry. And she would say at the end, you needed that. And that's when I really started to realize that your tears aren't your weakness. Your tears are actually your breakthrough. Another person I really want to talk about is my CASA worker, Miss Allison. And simply because she has been there since the very beginning. 7+ years, Miss Allison has been there for me, for my sister, and my brother Jarvis. And there's no one like her. There's no one like her. There was times where I would just call her, and I don't know if she would know or anything like that, but she would start praying for me instantly. And she knew that faith was what is going to keep me going. So that's what our relationship was based on. And just staying close to each other and keeping us together. She kept me and my siblings together for all the 7 years. There was times we couldn't see each other, and she would make a way. Every month, it was birthdays, Christmases. Miss Allison literally made it happen, and she didn't have to. When it came to court dates, when it came to visits or anything, outings, anything. The first time I went horseback riding was because of Miss Allison, you know. So I feel like a lot of people don't be able to even get to experience that, and because of her, I was able to. I talk about Miss Allison all the time, and it's just because if it wasn't for her, I probably even wouldn't have my driver's license, if I'm being honest. Yeah, Miss Allison, she taught me how to drive. She made sure I went to permit school. She made sure I had everything that I needed to go into adulthood. And she was there every step of the way, no matter what. I would like to say that I am somewhat successful. I am going into the area of entrepreneurship. I am going to college to become a family specialist. I would like to stand in the gap for foster youth, like they stood in the gap for the people that stood in the gap for me when I was in the foster system. Hope is very important, because if you lose it, it's hard. Hope, because of having hope, you would want to keep going. And every single person gave me hope.
Okay, that was it.
Wow.
Like I said, it's so good to see where she's at today, because I remember having those conversations with Allison, and it was like, what are we gonna do? How do we help this family and these kids continue to do good? And it was great to hear that she's made the progress that she has.
Yeah, and when I think about this issue of fostering and foster care, it's such a huge concern and issue in our community, right? And it's such a huge opportunity to make a difference. I have the blessing of being a foster and adoptive parent, and I think what I found on the journey is that there's so many more people that have these same kinds of stories. And this is where I think it's important for our community to recognize that we all have an opportunity to support, whether it's an official fostering position, but we make a difference. And what I heard Jamie is that she's making a difference now, right? That there was people, her CASA, that made a difference. And all they did was come, show up, and care, right? And I think that's, again, one of the takeaway messages. Can we show up and care?
Did you know that there's this thing called 988?
911?
No, 988. So there's a new, this is nationwide, 988. It's kind of like 911, but you call it when you have a mental health crisis. So there's someone to answer the phone and say, it's okay.
Wow.
Yeah, so some of the videos we're gonna see.
So folks that are on those lines ready to support the community and to be that kind of come alongside and be that relational support in time of trouble.
You can even just text them and they'll text you back and have a conversation. Sometimes you need to get through that moment, right?
Yeah, that's
it's there.
amazing.
Yeah, so let's check that out.
All right.
So initially, I always wanted to work in the criminal justice system. I thought I either wanted to become a lawyer, a police officer, and actually once I did graduate with my bachelor's from Fresno State, I discovered Kingsview. They had a variety of great programs. And I knew mental health was growing, so I knew I wanted to help people. So I did apply to the Transitional Age and Youth Program, where I got to work with a great group of people. We got to go out to elementary schools in all of Fresno County and middle schools, and we basically got to just teach students about mental health, how to cope with their issues, how to find support, what resources are out there. And I actually discovered, right in the same building was a suicide prevention lifeline. I was super nervous when I did kind of get exposed to it. They told me what they do there. They were actively recruiting because they were servicing as a call center throughout the entire nation. So right now we only service California, but we did have a backup contract where we were a backup call center for the entire nation. I was encouraged by my former manager to apply, and I was super nervous because I've had family members who I've lost to suicide. I've had friends who had those thoughts, and I just thought there was no way am I going to be able to help somebody, de-escalate from having a suicidal attempt. So I was super nervous. I decided to take the risks knowing I wanted to help individuals, and I figured if I can I guess just empower my skills to be able to talk to people, I was like, I want to try it. I don't want to know what if I didn't. So I decided to take the risk, and through training and just learning more about how being able to help people, I really just grew more of a passion for the field and for helping individuals who find themselves having thoughts of suicide or in any type of crisis situation. Working for the call center definitely was not as intensive as I thought it was going to be. Like I said, I was very nervous. I was afraid. I didn't really quite think, what methods individuals would be trying to take their life with. And I was just super scared that, I'm not going to be able to stop somebody. Like, what kind of things do you say to somebody who, with their unique situation, they've experienced maybe the worst day of their life or the worst week or, whatever it may be. And, once you do get on those lines, a lot of individuals, even though they're calling out and it is their last strand of hope, individuals just need somebody to talk to. A lot of individuals, unfortunately, don't have somebody that they feel maybe safe enough to open up to. Sometimes they feel like they don't want to be a burden to others. So just being able to be a listening ear really helps in a large way. And so it's really just being able to support somebody, definitely validating their own unique experiences. And it's not, the level of that you would think prior going into the call center. I would say our callers, they really do experience their own unique situations. Life gets the best of us sometimes. It happens to every single one of us. None of us are safe from that. And sometimes, individuals are so clouded with emotions, rightfully so, and there really is no clear way to see, like, am I gonna get over this obstacle? Is it gonna get better? Can I recover from this? So really just allowing that space of letting them know someone's hearing you, I understand you, letting them know, like, you have a right to feel that way. Maybe you did mess up, or maybe this person did this to you, and you have a right to feel that way, but also just know it's temporary. We're humans, and we are able to recover from these things, and really just showing them that seeking the right form of help, or even just reaching out to the crisis line, allowing them to talk things through, really allows those emotions to just decrease. And we just kind of remain as optimistic as possible and show them that optimism really is a good tool to use in pushing forward and healing from the things that they've been through.
So another interesting thing that we're going to see is the importance of faith and religion in some of these stories. And that's really your expertise more than mine. Yeah. You want to tell me a little bit about what that means?
Well, I think what's interesting, right? We just, we talked a little bit earlier about the multidimensional culture, right? And we are multidimensional beings, and experiences affect and shape us physically, emotionally, and on a deeper level, on a spiritual level, right? And we live in a community of multi-faiths and perspectives on this bigger than life thing, right? This thing, this spirituality. And I think what I really appreciate is hearing that perspective, because that, for some, is their superpower. For sure. Right?
All right, so growing up in the African-American church, where my father was a pastor, it was very significant and important that we prayed and worshiped God, which is important. I once preached a message called Prayer is Enough, and prayer is enough, because some people typically say, well, all I can do is pray. Prayer is enough. But in the Black church, we also need to bring in and adopt other practices that can come alongside our prayer to help us when we're facing mental health challenges. Because too often we assume that because we're here spiritually that somehow magically life doesn't happen. But life happens no matter what. And when life happens, we have to have practical ways to address it. We should pray. We should trust God. We shouldn't, sometimes in the church we say cliche things like, oh, just worship it away or just praise it away. You should. We should always worship God, and men should always pray, and we should always seek God. But sometimes we need some practical steps, some practical applications that we can apply in our everyday life that can help us through difficult, challenging times. When we've lost a loved one unexpectedly, when the partner that we married, that we expected to be with for the rest of our life, decided they didn't want to be married to us no more. When you have a child that you raised one way and they turn around and leave your house and live a whole nother way, that can be difficult. And grief and trauma is not always, or grief is not always someone dying. Grief could be having a child with a disability. You're not grieving that your child is disabled, but you're grieving the child that you expected to have. So we have to have practical ways that can help us address the issues that we face in life, even in marriages, even in relationships, and the dynamics that go on there. Sometimes it can cause us to be at a state of dis-ease. I'm not talking about a sickness. I'm not talking about cancer. I'm talking about a state of mental dis-ease, where we're not at ease. We're not at peace. We're not stable. And so when we're in a dis-eased state, we need to find help. And that's through our mental health practitioners and the things that we can do to try to help others. In the Black community, you didn't go talk to white folk. You didn't go talk to nobody. You could talk to your mama, but that's about it. It was a stigma associated with what's wrong with you? Get over it. A lot of times, even in Western culture, we're expected to get over grief and loss. You get 3 days of bereavement, but you better be back to work and you better be happy and doing your job. We need to be able to allow ourselves to go through, for example, stages of grief or whatever we're dealing with. Sometimes we need additional support that shouldn't be stigmatized or we shouldn't be looked down upon because we're going through something. Going through is important. When you can't go through, when you stop progressing, and when you get suicidal thoughts and you want to end it all, that's really the issue that we want to avoid. When people are going through stuff, you want to support them so that they can get through it. So faith gives us hope. Faith in some translations is the evidence of things hoped for, but not yet seen. So faith gives us hope. We hope to establish a culture that will give anybody that's hurting an opportunity for healing. Okay, a lot of people in our society today feel hopeless. Well, I'm not smart enough. I'm not handsome. I'm not handsome enough. I'm not pretty enough. Or I'm not like this person. Or I'm not like that person. Or, I don't have as many friends on Facebook or Instagram. And they become hopeless. And they look into social media and they see all the fabulous and great things that's going on in other people's lives, and they equate that to their lives being insignificant, and they lose hope. Well, I want to be a person that supports hope for everyone. That no matter what state you're in, no matter how you're feeling, no matter where you came from, no matter who your parents are or who your parents aren't, no matter what the circumstances of your life and how you came into this world, you still have hope, because everybody has a purpose and a destiny. But sometimes we get hopeless and we get sidetracked because sometimes things happen in life that we don't expect. And some people have maybe mental health issues runs in their family, and they don't know why grandma used to act that way. And they don't know why when the weather changed, daddy didn't want to go outside. Sometimes they don't understand those things. And then when it happens to them, they think something's wrong with them. No, it's not that something's wrong with you, but you're wired in a way that you need some practical step-by-step things that can help you get through the issues that you're facing and give you hope. So I want to be a beacon of hope for people. With my knowledge, my training, I don't exactly remember when I felt like psychology and spirituality or faith should be combined. I just felt like we do have all of our needs met through faith and through God. But sometimes there's some stuff that we just need to learn how to do. If you have a mental health condition that is affected by the weather, like I said before, or if you find yourself getting anxious and when you have to approach difficult situations, that doesn't mean that God can't help you, but He's also provided other tools that can support you and help you get through whatever you're going through. So there's hope for anybody. And I definitely want to encourage people to have hope. I felt like the best way to address the needs of others, because I found pretty early in life that my goal and who I am, a former athlete, participated at Fresno State, and just found that helping other people is what I intrinsically want to do. Not so they'll like me, not so they'll say, well, Sam did that, or he's a good guy, but because it was the right thing to do. So when I had those opportunities, I did it. And sometimes it was just listening. Sometimes it was encouraging. It was being a motivator and a support to somebody else when they were going through difficult times. And people always go through difficult times. It's important to have somebody around you that won't judge you, but that will also give you the hope that you need in order to get to the place that you want to be.
So this one is also a lot. I mean, there's a lot of emotions going into a lot of this work. And when it comes to addiction, there's a few things that are going to be said in this next video that really landed with me and the work that we do. What do you think about addiction and what that journey is?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things that really come out of this, right? Is that there's this stigma that it's a character issue, it's a morality issue, and the reality is that I don't know that there's anybody that's not touched by this topic, right? And as you'll see in the story, that there's still deep pain. And that's the thing I want people to understand about this healing, is that healing doesn't mean the pain goes away. Healing means that purpose and meaning emerge out of the pain. The Phoenix experience, right?
There it is, yeah.
That comes out, and now what are you gonna do with that? And that requires that we become the author of our stories.
Our son Zach, who's our only child, about the age of 19, he passed away of a accidental drug overdose. He really dealt with addiction. I mean, that we knew about. We're not really exactly sure when it started, but about a year prior to him passing away. And as a result of that, we started a foundation in his name, the Zachary Horton Foundation. For me, the foundation really exists because it's in his memory. It's something we wanted to do to kind of keep his name alive and have a legacy. And then in addition, we're doing a lot of good work with people that are in recovery.
Raising a child and going through all the exciting things that happened with Zach through school and middle school, and I was a stay-at-home dad from the time he was about 6, and doing Cub Scouts with him and doing karate and coaching soccer and coaching baseball and going and playing Magic on Friday nights, Magic, the card game. It was just fabulous. But as kids become teenagers, we began to just kind of separate a little bit. He began to develop his own friendships, which we believed were real positive. And again, as my wife mentioned, tragically, he passed away from an accidental drug overdose about 3 years ago. He had just graduated high school. He went to Clovis North. Early on, Zach had developed, and we found out, I want to say it was probably first or second grade. The teachers came to us and said, gosh, Zach has some issues with ADHD, or that's what they suspected. He was not able to pay attention in class. And we went and had him tested, and sure enough, he was off the charts with ADHD. And literally the day after he started taking his medication, he was able to complete every task. The school that he was at, they'd put up a list on the chalkboard of 10 things that he needed to accomplish during the day. This is when they weren't doing regular activities, so they'd always stay busy. before Zach was tested and before he began taking medication, he could accomplish, they'd say 2 or 3 of those. After his medication, he would get done with all 10 of them. He just in a snap. So his ability to focus was definitely there. So that definitely was an issue. What they find with ADD oftentimes is that there's some co-occurring issues, either OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder, even Tourette's, or there's some other things that go along with it. Zach's happened to be depression. And as he became a teenager and we found out that he was smoking weed, our first response was to ground him heavily and to bring down the hammer. And as we went and talked to the counselors, they explained that he was probably self-medicating and that we just needed to, that wasn't an argument that we needed to have with him. Was he a good student? Yes. Was he doing well? Yes. He was working every weekend from the time he was 15. He was a hard worker. Several semesters in school, he got straight A's.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that's important to share is that, he had ADD and this co-occurring disorder with depression. And I did have conversations with him about the importance of, really never using it, that it runs in the family, and this is something, you really got to think about. And he just, obviously he, like a lot of teenagers did what he was going to do.
Our denial was finally broken.
Yeah.
Now in retrospect, I look back and it's like, how in the world could I have been in denial? He had come to me. I had seen him go through withdrawals. Mm-hmm. He had come to me and he had said these things, but you want to believe in so much about of your children and about and so when he says, Dad, I'm all good, then you want to believe that. Right, and so, and likewise, so we immediately put him into he went into a medical detox program, came out of medical detox, 10 days later, went into an outpatient program, was staying at a sober living, and I remember just saying to Liz, like, oh my gosh, we dodged a bullet. Again, still not understanding, not having any comprehension of what substance use disorder was about and how deep and how powerful that this was. And it's not just a one-time deal. You don't have one round of chemo and all of a sudden stage 4 cancer is gone. It doesn't happen that way, right? It's months and months of work, and that's what we needed and we didn't see that. So his whole transition for the next 9 months was in and out of rehabs. He would relapse about every 30 to 45 days. Whether one time he was at the Clovis Rodeo, and he had some beers. One time, he'd go out with some friends when he graduated and they went out and got loaded, he smoked some dope right afterwards. And so there was always, he'd have a dirty test about every 30 or 45 days. And one of the groups that we were involved in, every time that this happened, there was just an encouragement to withdraw more, to bring down more punishment, to become harsher. Instead of being able to celebrate the fact my son had been using every day for 3 years almost in a row, and now instead of celebrating the fact that he's 30 and 45 days clean and only using, a half a dozen times in 9 months, I wasn't able to see that. And I'm sure, and his social skills at that time, the way that he dealt with problems wasn't like a normal 18-year-old. It was, it was like a 15-year-old because he'd been using, and that's the way he had learned to deal with all of his problems and with all of his depression and anxiety was just by using. So that was I think that's been one of the hardest things for me to deal with as a parent, especially once he passed. Was realizing that last 9 months I lost that opportunity to connect with him and to reach out to him and to really show how deeply I loved him. And I know I said it, and I'm sure he knew, but at that time, that's not how I was coming across. And that's something I still deeply regret.
When he went, finally, the last time he was in treatment, he was down south at a program. And we kept him down there for about 45 days, which was the longest we'd ever had him inpatient. And when he came back, that was the best I'd seen him.
We look back at that time and we realize how ill-prepared we were. So in relation to the foundation, as soon as he passed, we realized that we wanted to do something. We needed to do something.
A part of it for me is the ability to help others, and that gives me purpose. And so I think for me that it's it's in Zach's name, and we talk a lot about Zach when people ask questions, and every once in a while we run into somebody that knew Zach. And I mean, so that's another part of it. It really is that personal connection for me.
Some of our closest friends now, and the people that we spend time with, the people that I talk to on the phone every day, are people from the recovery community. And I would have never believed until I had this experience that I could see people that have had just the most hideous trauma that could ever be imagined. The longest, ex-convicts that have been in and out of institutions, and now are, and I look at them and I can't even believe it when I hear their stories, when I'm interviewing them on my podcast, and I'm staring across the table at somebody who's now one of my closest buddies, somebody I sit down and have a cigar with, or we go to functions together and we hang out together. And an addiction, substance use disorder, is like any other disease. It's always hanging there in the background. I get that, and there's different discussions about what that looks like. But just because someone has had an experience, that does not define who they are for the rest of their lives, right? And I think that I think families need to hear that, and that's one of the awful things about substance use disorder and why it affects families so bad, and it's hard for them to see it as because it tears the family apart, and it's because it's part of that mental disease too, and a disease of the mind, and the suffering person isn't in their right mind. So they do things that they would never do, and that's clear because as soon as they're clean, as soon as they're now back in the light, they are that same loving person that they were before.
So that one really hits home.
Yeah.
I worked at child welfare in the CPS for a while, and addiction and that conversation is such a huge impact on our community. So let's take a minute to really kind of talk through that, because he said so many important things. Historically, there's been such a punitive, punishing morality thing around addiction, and you just need to make better decisions. That's the problem. And it's like, well, actually what we know about the brain is that there's a lot going on around addiction and around substances that people use to cope with the situations and things like that. So I'm glad that things are moving in the right direction, especially here. A lot more programs are trauma informed and compassionate and are focusing on harm reduction and that sort of concept, because what we know is that just telling people you're bad and you should stop doing things really isn't effective.
And you know what I think what's important too, having my own journey in recovery, right? And addiction, is this understanding that there's experiences matter. Experiences affected how that addiction developed and progressed, and it's the experiences that actually help support the treatment and the recovery process, right, for longevity and sustained recovery, right?
Ooh, and then did you catch that part? I loved this. He said we were so busy being frustrated with each relapse that we didn't celebrate the fact that he was clean for 30 days or clean for 45 days. And man, like he teared up, I teared up, because he's like, I wish we would have spent more time in each of those moments praising and rebuilding that relationship, as opposed to being so focused on, oh, it's a relapse, it's a failure. Those kinds of things, when the hope was in those moments of sobriety that he did experience. So,
and I think, what he talked about too was so important, is that the fact that by the time people get to where their son was, right? A lot of those relational bridges. Yeah. There's a lot of collateral damage, right? But the fact that they're in those spaces says volumes. And today we have so many people that are seeking recovery and accessing services today.
More in recovery than are experiencing addiction, right?
And I have the fortunate privilege of facilitating some groups with that are in treatment. Yeah. And it's amazing. And this is, I think, is worth saying too. And I think this is what Jim talked about, the necessity to educate, support, and inform families. Yeah. Right? Embedding family services to support, because addiction has its roots and origin, just like our stories, in the families.
Another story, another interesting person that works in our community is Rodney. I think you met Rodney. Yeah, at the Resiliency Center, right? Yeah, so much good work being done there. So in this next one, he's going to tell his personal story about some of the things that he went through and how he now is giving back at the Resiliency Center, and he loves being a support to the community. Yeah. So.
You know, I think that's really important too, because our frontline responders, right, that respond to these incidences and of experiencing challenges in the community, often we don't think about the lasting impact on their lives and how it affects their stories.
Yeah,
right?
And he talks about vicarious trauma, which is when you start to experience someone else's story and it kind of changes your story,
right,
and how you see the world.
And that's interesting because we're not as separate as we think. Yeah.
So we're talking about trauma, and oftentimes we think about those things that affect us as adults, you know, that kind of derail us and cause some scarring. But in actuality, nobody gets out of this world, out of this life, without being exposed to trauma. It's a tough world, no matter who you are. It doesn't matter your zip code, right? And oftentimes trauma starts at a very young age. To be totally transparent, trauma started for me when I was 9 years old and lost my father and witnessed it. And I can tell you that, unbeknownst to me then, what happened was that the architecture in my brain, my thinking patterns, just kind of went offshoot. When I saw that, I think I began to just develop this mindset or these thinking patterns of hopelessness and kind of struggled, quite frankly. And those that are watching that grew up with me know that, you know, there was risky behavior when I was in high school and, you know, looking for, and I think everybody looks for this moment of, right? We're looking for healthy ways to just catch that breath. And I jokingly say this tongue in cheek, but it's true. We're all in therapy. Every one of us are in therapy. We don't always need a therapist, right? And that therapy could be exercising. It could be sitting down with your loved one and having that decaf at night, glass of wine, whatever it is, but we're always looking for that. So as I matured and I grew up, I just looked at an opportunity of what did I want to do with my rest of my life, and I followed the footsteps of my older brother, went into law enforcement, and I did that, and I became a part of some strategic teams or tactical teams, Violent Crime Suppression Unit, the SWAT team here in Fresno, and unbeknownst to me, that the thinking patterns that I developed when I was young actually were cemented in as my experience grew in law enforcement, because of all the incidents of traumatic exposure just reaffirmed those things. So as I was able to step away from law enforcement upon retirement, I looked at my experiences and the amount of calls that happen in our communities involving children, our first responders who are not receiving the care that they need to because of a lack of understanding in quality mental health, was to design a program. That program is called the Resiliency Center in Fresno, where we proactively look for calls and for services involving children impacted by trauma. We reach out segue those children right into clinical counseling so we can challenge those thinking patterns that develop right at the onset of the trauma. Then likewise, we've developed a system through an app where first responders can self-report their own instance of exposure and schedule themselves into counseling, and we're having tremendous success. We opened in 2019. We're seeing about 150 clients per week. 22% are first responders, your local first responders who are maintaining their health so they can better serve our community. Kids are receiving hope and help. It's just been an awesome program, and I'm so fortunate to have had, quite frankly, the negative experiences that led up to a realization that we could do things better in the community. I think what I would say to those people that are on the fence, should I reach out to a therapist, or should I call regarding my child who's demonstrating some behavior that makes me a little bit concerned, is that simply understanding that therapy is just proactive measures to keep your body and mind healthy. If you believe in eating right, going to the gym, good therapy follows. Because what it does is simply expose your own resilient features, gives you the coping strategies, because whatever you're going through right now will end, right? And there is hope. But rest assured, more challenges are on their way. So with children especially, the sad truth, and I'll go back to my law enforcement career. It doesn't matter how many safety officers we deploy on the street. We'll never be able to stop bad things from happening to good people, to children. We have to come to grips with that. And when we come to grips with that, what follows is we better start to learn to build and reinforce resiliency in our children. Because those difficult times are coming, and the tools that can be given through a therapeutic setting will last them a lifetime. And they're going to be able to share with their friends, their families, and their children. So if you want to impact your children's children, get them into somebody that can help them develop strong strategies for walking through this world.
One of the things in this next video that really stands out for me is the way we really started doing trauma-informed training. But through our journey, we were like, that trauma thing is really important, but what's even more important to us is resilience. And really focusing on the evolution of people and of thought, and how if we really focus on how to be strong and how to grow through a situation, I think this next video really also talks about the change that we've seen in services, how we've seen less of a focus on what's wrong with you to what happened to you, because that really shaped you.
From deficit-based to a strength-based approach.
Yeah, good.
Awesome.
My name is Trevor Burkholtz, and I'm the clinical supervisor for the older adult team with the Department of Behavioral Health. And for those who aren't familiar with behavioral health, we deal with mental health issues like depression, bipolar disorder, thought disorders like schizophrenia. Now, working in mental health is not all roses. There are challenges for sure. When I first went to work in mental health, I was like most people when you get started, what have I gotten myself into? School didn't prepare me for this. People are complex. The issues are not simple. It's not like cut and dry and you don't know exactly what to do all the time. And I learned, I guess I was just lucky. I learned that just listening to people and showing that I cared and that I didn't pretend to know the answers to everything really helped. I also, because I started as a case manager, I was all ears and eyes. I was wanting to know, asking the clinicians everything. Why do you do this? And how do you know what to do here? And that helped me to ask questions. Now, a big challenge that affected me in the beginning, I was working for Orange County Mental Health. Well, what happened is a lot of my friends lost their job. A lot of programs I was working in closed down. And here I was, always being hopeful and positive, and I started to get down. In fact, I got depressed. I got so depressed that I felt like a failure. I felt like, what am I doing here? Why am I kidding myself? How can I help other people if I can't even help myself? I had all those thoughts. I was a young clinician, and I had all those thoughts, and you know, the best thing to happen to me was I shared them. I shared them with my boss, and I thought they were going to say, okay, you're fired. You're not cut out for this. You have to go. And they did anything but that. She welcomed me. She told me she was so glad I was talking about it, that she had gone through anxiety and depression. A lot of people do. She made me feel normal just talking to me like that. And she supported me, and she said that if I needed to take some time off, she supported that. But as far as she was concerned, she saw no reason why I couldn't keep working. And that took such a big load off me. And I went to see a therapist. I got on medication for depression. And after a couple of months, my therapist and I felt I didn't need therapy anymore. I stayed on the medication for a year because my wife wanted me to stay on it. So I listened to her and I said, okay, I think I'm good now, but I stayed on it. That made a big difference for me. It gave me such compassion for people. I thought I was compassionate before, you know. We often think we're something, and then something happens to us, we go, man, did that change me? And that changed me. I became so more patient with people. I became much more aware that things take a lot more time to sort out. And if you just give people time, it's amazing how much they can help sort things out for themselves. I am hoping that everyone who sees me gets the belief, the hope that if you need help, you can get it. You can get it quickly. And the help you're going to get is informed now. It's informed with evidence-based practices. Things like cognitive behavioral therapy for psychosis, dialectical behavioral therapy. When we instituted those two kinds of practices with our older adults, people who've been in the system for 30, 40 years, people that thought they're always going to be like this. I even had staff who said, they're never going to get any better. If they haven't got better by now, they're not going to get better. And we started using these practices, which emphasize two things mostly: building rapport, seeing it from their eyes, and giving them skills. Don't discounting that they can still learn something to manage their own life better. When we started using those skills, people got better. We saw people who are no longer coming to the Department of Behavioral Health. Dozens and dozens. So not only can you get services quicker, and you don't have to go through so many barriers to get those services, but when you do get help, you can have a lot of hope that you're going to learn things to manage your own life, and you won't have to depend on other people to be the experts in your life.
Wow.
Yeah.
So that was intense, man. I think it really just, each of those stories, each of those narratives just really reminds me about how the people that come in and out of our lives, and even the people that came before us, set things in a certain motion, and we have the power in us at times to be able to change the trajectory or continue in the same trajectory.
Yeah.
And really, I think that's the beauty of human nature and of this beautiful brain that we have is we can spend time, once we're aware of what's going on, to start to rewire and rebuild and change. I think both of us have experienced interesting things in our lives that we could say that was a bad thing that happened to me, or we could say that happened. And here I go because of that.
If each one of us would just focus on how we are connected and writing that never-ending story that is filled with pain and difficulties and challenges, but are also filled with acts of compassion, support, and care that brings those experiences of hope to fruition. Significance into the future, stories of those that we care about. In the airplane.
Situation that she explained through her experience.
Yeah, and we got all this traffic going by through here.
Yeah.
The most important thing that we as humans that fly in planes.
The most important thing as humans. Oh yeah, the train. Well, we avoided the train pretty well.
Yeah.
All right, so this next one is right. Oh, I'm not supposed to hit the mic. I know what I'm doing. I'm a professional.
Other people, hey, can you say that again? I'm like, no.
Me. You can just delete that out. I was like, man, should I make him say that one more time?
And I have no idea where to go next.